My favorite portion.
So you're getting a couple of those that just came in. You're getting a couple of handouts. Getting one, the slides for today, my overview, and then you're going to get another handout for a 2-page review of terms that you can study later. A few of those we'll cover today. Most of those we won't, but I wanted to have something that you study later as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Does anybody not have one? Okay. Anybody else have any extra PowerPoints or handouts that maybe are handouts?
I think the other ones are going
PowerPoints. I see handouts in the middle there. Maybe they'll pick up. I think you printed 70.
Oh wait, no, they do.
Do you have anybody have any random piles of stuff that doesn't belong next to them? Human growth topics, specifically human growth topics. All right. Well, I know that you don't need me to tell you this, but I know probably some of you look forward to this day with some less than enthusiastic feelings. However, this is a great sign that you are nearing the end. So give yourself a hand for that. Those of you that are here at this point, it's a great. This is a big marker. It's a mile marker that the end is in sight. So another semester internship, right? Maybe a couple of classes, and you're good to go. So we are going to review human growth and development today. Those of you, all of you have been in the class, know that the textbook is really thick, right? And it covers so much material. So we're just going to go over some of the things that I think you need to study for based on taking the exam, based on what students have told me that they've taken the exam on human growth questions. We're gonna review a few test questions that I pulled from Rosenthal's study guide. I'll talk more about helpful resources at the end. So we're going to review a few of the major theories today, and we're going to review some other highlights of human growth, and then I'm going to give you've got your term study guide for your terms, and you've also got the slides. So today is not enough, no matter, those of you maybe have been informed or misinformed, today is not enough to be prepared for the NCE. What? Surprise, shock, trauma. Okay. Today is not enough. Small T trauma, right? Today is not enough to be prepared for NCE. It's a stepping stone for you to take this material and for you to continue to study your other resources that you have to be prepared for the NCE and comprehensive exam. So just know that. Example questions are, I'm going to take a few of those from Rosenthal's Encyclopedia. Yes, Amanda. That works too. That works too. I'll talk about that at the end. Yeah, that works too. That's helpful. That's a helpful resource. Yeah. So I'm not going to be taking a lot of questions because I probably won't have a lot of time, but I may have a little bit of time. If we do, we'll take questions. But you feel free to email me, call me up. If you have a question about something you're studying, next week, next month, April 3rd, you're studying May, the night before, you're wrapping up your study notes, hopefully not the night before, but if you you want to email me, feel free to do that. Okay? So, if someone were to kind of tie my arm behind my back and say, what do I absolutely need to be familiar with from this core content area? I would say, well, if you had to know like 8 or 9 things, I would know these theories. Okay? And 4 of them we're going to review more in depth today. The others were not, but you need to be familiar with them. So you need to know Freud, obviously. You need to know Freud, psychosexual theory. You need to know Erickson's psychosocial theory. Piaget's cognitive theory. Bowlby's attachment theory. You need to know the 3 primary behavioral theories in Pavlov, Skinner, and Bandura. I'm not going to review those today, but you need to know them. you need to know Kohlberg's moral theory and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If I were to rate them top 4 ranked as they are, as far as importance you need to know, and I would also say Maslow as well, because I've had a couple students say that that's been on the exam. So if you know those 5 out of 9, you know those 9, you're doing really well. You know those 5 out of 9 that are asterisk, you're doing well. But these 9 are the big ones, okay, to know for the exam. Other highlights today, we're going to review very, very simply, very basics of the brain. We're going to look at early emotions in development, regulation, and coping. We're going to look at parenting styles. We're going to look at childhood trauma, neglect, abuse, and its effect on kids. We're going to review that counseling is a developmental model. We look at people, individuals, families, groups. We look through a developmental lens. We're going to look briefly at older adults, and we're going to look briefly at grief and loss and the stages of dying. So that's what we're going to look at today. Okay. So, you need to know that Freud's theory is psychosexual, and it's also referred to on a broader level as psychoanalytic. So it can be referred to synonymously as Freud's psychosexual theory, or it can also be referred to synonymously as Freud's psychoanalytic theory. Okay, those terms are used interchangeably with Freud. You've got oral stage, first 18 months. You got the anal stage. I'll review a little bit more in depth when we get into the next slide. 18 months to 3 years. You got phallic stage, 3 to 6 years. Latency, 6 years to puberty. And you got genital stage, puberty, the end of life. One of the major criticisms of Freud, and there's several, right? But one of the major ones is that how can a genital stage cover such a large part of the lifespan? Okay, that's one of the major criticisms. That may or may not be on the exam. Criticisms of the major theories sometimes do appear as a test question from time to time. So be aware of kind of those top 2 or 3 major criticisms. That's one of the criticisms of psychosexual, and we'll review some of the other criticisms that go along. So a little background. So in Freud's view, if you have a need for pleasure at any stages, either undergratified or overgratified. So underutilized or overutilized, an individual may become fixated or locked in at that specific stage of development. So as children grow up, their focus of pleasure and sexual impulse shifts from the mouth to the anus to the genital area, and our adult personality is determined by the way we resolve these conflicts between these sources of pleasure at each of these stages of development. Okay. Again, psychoanalytic or psychosexual. Often the most used concepts from this theory are, at least in the counseling world, counseling literature, are often defense mechanisms, so specific ways that we manage our anxiety or our impulses. Be familiar with the defense mechanisms. Be familiar with denial. Be familiar with projection, regression, repression. Those defense mechanisms. Okay. Some of the more postmodern, modern psychoanalytics believe that Freud placed too much emphasis on sexual instincts and determinants. So, in other words, like we're born this way, and this is the nature part of our disposition, if you will. And one of the most influential revisionists of Freud was Erikson, which we'll get to here in a second. So you may have a question like this. Freud's psychosexual stages, or that could be psychoanalytic stages, okay? Freud's psychosexual stages include, and then you have 4 options. Sometimes you will see a combination of terms within a specific content area. So like this example, eros, regression, denial, those are all different concepts within psychosexual, right? So that could be very confusing because it might throw you off. Ego, superego, again, very important terms of how our selves or personalities are constructed, but not specifically the developmental stages, right? So manifest and latent are terms associated with dreams in psychoanalysis. Eros refers to life instinct, and regression and denial are defense mechanisms. Based on that information, what would the correct answer be here? 3. Yeah. 3. Okay. Freud in 5 minutes or less, right? Freud in a nutshell. Don't let Freud interpret with that statement. Okay. All right. Erickson's this is being taped. I can remember that. All right. Erickson's psychosocial theory. Trust versus mistrust. Infancy. Up till age 1. You got autonomy versus doubt and shame. More the toddler age. You got initiative versus guilt. I don't have to read them all, you can read them. So Erickson's interesting. Erickson, at least in the helping professions like counseling, social work, psychology, Erickson's psychosocial theory is the most widely cited development theory in literature. So it's referred to as psychosocial specifically to Erikson, but it's considered as a psychoanalytic theory under the broad umbrella. So kind of like Freud is considered psychoanalytic theory, but it's also specifically psychosexual model. Erikson, under the psychoanalytic umbrella, was specifically psychosocial theory, right? So specific to Erikson. Contrast with Freud, who believed that the primary motivation for human behavior is sexual. Erikson rejected that and said, no, it's not sexual, it's social. It's our need, our desire, our urge to connect with another human being. Erikson drove home the argument of, yes, we come out with all these determinants, and we have all these certain things that we, that drive us and motivate us, but an infant left unattended without touch will die. A newborn will die without touch, without social interaction. So that's Erikson and kind of his take on that. So the only psychoanalyst who created a developmental theory which encompasses the entire lifespan was Erik Erikson, John Piaget, Donald Super, or Milton Erickson. You have it in front of you. So Milton H. Erickson, different than Erik Erikson. So Milton H. Erickson, more associated with brief hypnosis. Super is one of our, just had my song career right before lunch. Super is one of the grand career theorists, right? He's one of the early ones. Piaget focuses on child cognitive development, which we'll get into here in about 10 seconds. All right. Let's review a little bit more in depth of Erikson. I got a few slides here that are not in your handout, but I will make them available on Canvas, okay? Or have them sell them forward to you. One or the other. So, what's that? Okay, here rumblings. Okay. Babies are born with some basic capabilities and distinct temperaments, but they go through dramatic childhood changes, right, because of their environment. And so each individual passes through these psychosocial stages. So whereas Freud looked at, okay, you have these developmental tasks, and if there's over gratification or under gratification, then you're kind of stuck in that stage. Erikson believed that these are more psychological crises, and that these crises must be resolved by the individual in order to progress. So very similar kind of feel to it, but seeing it more as a crisis that must be achieved or passed through or kind of worked through. And that maybe if the crisis is not achieved or is not satisfied, then the outcome will be that there's these more struggles later in life. So, yes, we have determining forces, and yes, we have these kind of dispositions. However, the emphasis from Erikson is more on nurture social, relational, kind of how we relate to other people. So this part, right, those of you who have undergrad psychology are like, yawn, I know this, right? Like, I know all this stuff. But it's a good review for others that didn't have that. And maybe have not had human growth in a while. So
One of the exam questions seemed like was identity crisis, the term that they would use, and Erickson would be the answer to that, correct?
one of the questions related to where did you receive the question? Rosenthal, okay. Yeah, identity crisis most likely would be, depending on what the answers are, but I mean, identity crisis could be taken different ways.
Right.
I can look at identity as a, is it age identity crisis? Is it developmental crisis? Like what type of crisis is it?
But that was the answer that they had.
Okay.
Necessarily.
You recall the other answers or no?
No.
Okay, so you didn't memorize that?
Okay.
Right? It's all information overload today, right? It's like, it's all hidden. Yeah, so probably so. I would have to know those answers, but yeah. If Rosenthal said it, then it's, you're good to go. It's gospel from, it's coming from him. As far as the NCE is concerned, he's excellent. So trust versus mistrust, again, what does this look like in infancy? Sometimes on the exam, you might get something like this where there is this like, Jenny is in her first year of life and she is, and to kind of create this like little snippet or this little mini vignette, and then you have to say what developmental period she is in, and so kind of just knowing that for these different areas. So it's positive outcome, negative outcome. So in the first stage, if Jenny's needs are met consistently and responsibly, it does not only develop a secure attachment with the parents, but will learn to trust their environment in general as well. So not only will I learn to trust my caregiver, but I'll also learn that the world is pretty much a safe place. And negative outcome, I not only mistrust my caregivers, but I also begin to believe the world is unsafe, or the world's not going to be my needs. Autonomy versus doubt. So toddlers learn to walk, talk, use toilets, do things for themselves. So the self-control and self-confidence begins to develop. Positive outcome, if parents encourage the child's use of initiative and reassure her when she makes mistakes. So develop confidence to cope with future situations and have more independence and control. Negative outcome, parents are overprotective or strong, firm disapproval of the child's acts of independence. She may begin to feel shame about her behavior and really begin to doubt herself. Just kind of contrast that. Initiative versus guilt. Beginning to develop more and more fine motor skills and beginning to become more and more engaged in social interaction with others, peers, people around them, adults. And so kind of looking at the balance between I'm adventuring out, I'm exploring new people, new things, I have more responsibility. And so positive outcome is like parents are encouraging, consistent discipline, then they'll learn to accept without guilt that certain things are allowed, but at the same time will not feel shame and use their imagination, which is being kind of enhanced during this time. Negative outcome is children may develop a sense of guilt, come to believe that it's wrong to be autonomous, wrong to be independent. Okay. Competence versus inferiority. So school is the all-important event here, right? Usually. Children learn to make things, use tools, acquire skills. So it's this idea, this sense of mastery, sense of competence that happens during this stage. And if they can, children can figure out, okay, I can discover pleasure in this kind of stimulation, intellectually, cognitively, then I have my own sense of self-worth and confidence is I'm confident I can do things, I can figure things out. It gives me a sense of self-worth. Negative inferiority. And then identity versus role confusion in adolescence. Who am I? Yeah.
I think that's what you talk about. That's the crisis.
Okay.
Identity
The crisis of adolescence, specifically? Okay. That makes sense then. Yep. So I would suggest that adolescents must integrate the healthy resolution of earlier conflicts. So there you see the second paragraph, identity crisis, specifically in that, you know, this is the most significant conflict the person must face during this time frame. If the adolescent solves it, then they'll come out with a strong identity and ready to plan for the future and kind of feel confident in him or herself. If not, be confused, could impact vocation, could impact sexual orientation, could impact life in general. All those things could be impacted by that. Young adulthood and intimacy versus isolation. So it's all about relationships. It's all about connecting, whether it be friendships, whether it be romantic relationships. Developing a sense of intimacy, vulnerability, versus isolating. If you can do that during this time, then you're more likely to and more apt to continue to do this, develop good relationships in the future. If not, then you typically fear commitment, feel isolated, and just really unable to depend on anyone. So again, just kind of withdrawing from relationships. Middle adulthood, generativity versus stagnation. So look outside of yourself, care for others. Whether it be I'm caring for my kids, I'm caring for a cause that's greater than me. Whether it be I'm caring for family, friends. I'm more of a caregiver, more of like purposeful caregiving. Kind of this need to, I'm having a sense of purpose and caring for others so that I can kind of build my legacy. So positive outcome, and it could be with kids, it could be caring for a cause or giving into a purpose and meaning life. But if it's not successfully resolved, then that person may experience stagnation later in life, which then leads to the last stage, 65 to death. A lot of reflection on one's own life and, you know, did I leave a life worth living? Am I satisfied with what I've accomplished, who I've known, who I'm connected with, my relationships, and so forth. So if there's a positive outcome with adult achieving a sense of fulfillment, a sense of unity, then you tend to accept death with more peace, more integrity. Interestingly enough, Erickson said that just a healthy child will not fear life, a healthy adult will not fear death. If not, then despair and fear will then kind of dominate as that person approaches death. So Erickson in 12 minutes or less. Okay, are we getting some air? Are we treading water? Okay, it is kind of fast. Not kind of, definitely fast. So Piaget, cognitive theory. Very interesting enough, Piaget formed this theory based on his observations about his own kids. A lot of theorists did that, whether it be themselves, their own lives, their own children, family, their own experiences, their trauma, whatever it was. That's how they started the theory. So, sensory motor stage, birth to 2, understanding of the world by coordinating sensory experiences with physical actions. We have major problems if I let my 10-month-old son is on my shoulder, if I let him see the bottle before it's time for feeding, then he's like, I see the bottle, that means it's time to eat, and I'm not happy that I'm not eating it right now. So then it's all about the sensory, right? How do we kind of process information at that age? So the bottle model means that you're going to get fed and, you know, all of that. So that association, which then later becomes more defined into like beginning to look at symbols and kind of seeing symbols attached to meaning and so forth. So pre-operational stage, age 2 to 7. So more about words, more about images. So connecting sensory information to physical action, also attaching that to words and meaning. Age 7 to 11, concrete operational. So more about like, I'm putting things into categories, and I am not just, you know, from 2 to, maybe from like age 3 to 5, 3 to 7, you know, it was everything is a house, everything is a truck, you know, and then when I get to age 7, it's like, oh, I realized that motorcycles are motorcycle. There's a different name for that. It's not, everything's not just a truck. It's a motorcycle and it's a car and it's a semi and it's a train. Okay, not everything's a train anymore, right? So it's kind of putting things into different categories and putting things into different boxes, thinking more logically. And then at formal operational stage, 11 to 15, adolescent reasons in more abstract, realistic, logical ways, even though parents of adolescents challenge this on a daily basis. There's no way to have my adolescent, you know, thinks logically. But definitely adolescents are able to do that more often, right? During that time. So, question example. This goes back to earlier stuff too, but statement is the ego is dependent on the id, most likely to reflect the work of Freud, right? So Erickson focuses on ego psychology and will not emphasize the role of the id. Again, it's more social and more relational with Erickson. Ellis is the founder of rational emotive behavioral therapy. Lazarus was a behavioral theorist. And again, Freud would say that the ego is pressured by the id to submit for pleasure or gratification. For example, Piaget literature. Conservation most likely referred to. We go to 4 answers there. So what theory covers defensive and psychosexual stages? Freud, right? Piaget's theory of conservation refers to the concept that a substance's weight, mass, and volume, so weight, mass, volume, remains the same even if it changes shape, right? So it changes shape. So the child masters conservation during the concrete operational stage. Go back to concrete operational stage. 7 to 11. That's when conservation is achieved. Right. Questions? Hands? Go ahead.
Can you go back to the table? For now, we can't go to the.
Which one? Back to the PJ?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. Can't see the bottom one?
The property.
Oh, sorry about that. Is it not good? All right. Give me a second on that. Can you see his font kind of funky? No.
Okay. I just had a question. So the P2J is a conservation concept. That's the concept of the video they show us where it's a glass of water and they pour it into the big glass and the kid thinks the tall glass has more water in it.
Correct. Correct. Very similar to that same example. Yep. Yep. Being able to judge and being able to problem solve based on seeing different volume and masses in front of you. Yep. Okay. Were you able to get that? Okay. You're welcome. Sorry about that for now. Okay. So another question example, the Ericksonian stage that focuses heavily on sharing your life with another person. All of Erickson's stages focus on this. Generativity versus stagnation. Intimacy versus isolation. Balance stage. I guess one could say that no. That's young. That's younger. That's younger. Okay. So, people are watching this video and be like, "What did y'all do?" Right? That's fun. Seminars would be serious, right? Okay. So, does all of Erickson's theory focus on sharing one life. Not necessarily, right? There's certain specific tasks that do that, or different theories that do that. Valid stage is Freud, it's part of Freud. So which one do you think it is? Number 3. Yeah, it's all about relationships, right? It's all about relationships, and especially in young adulthood or emerging adulthood time frame. Okay, sensory motor is to Piaget. Anybody take the Miller's analogy test before they got in here? Yeah. So this is a question that's written like that, because you might get some of these on NCE, and you may get some on comprehensive exam too, where there's like these you know, you do this as to this, as to this, as to this, and so you're kind of like the parallel process of how these match up. So sensory motor is to Piaget, as oral is to Freud, and as blank is to Erickson. So Kohlberg's moral development comes later. Integrity versus despair is Erickson's final stage in his model, right? We know that sensory motor is the what stage? The first stage. And we know that oral is the first stage. And we know that trust versus mistrust is the first stage. So that's how you kind of answer those. Those of you who didn't take the MAT in all its glory. Okay, are we ready to move on to Bowlby? Attachment stuff, the really fun stuff, right? This is the stuff I enjoy. Okay. So I think we go until 1:50, 1:65. So we may have a little time for questions at the end. Bowlby's attachment theory. So Bowlby was a psychoanalyst, a psychiatrist as well, and so practiced psychoanalysis, but realized that psychoanalytic theory fell short, similar to Erickson, but for different reasons. Bowlby said that we need to have a theory that is able to address these really complex traumatic trauma, you know, complex trauma kids I'm seeing in my practice. Psychoanalysis really falls short with that. So Bowlby was really influenced by Harlow's monkeys. Anybody here know Harlow's monkeys? Familiar with that? Maybe took a trauma class or maybe even growth. So this kind of experiment with monkeys, I think it was back in the 60s, I think. Monkeys developed they observed that monkeys actually preferred kind of a comfortable figure that looked like a monkey, looked like it would be softer and more comfortable than the actual figure that gave a bottle that didn't have the comfort with it attached to it. And so would only go to the bottle when hungry, but other times would go to a more comfortable figure that looked like or that felt like their mother. And so Bowlby made some deductions from that well, monkeys prefer comfort over food many times, or comfort over these other associations, than maybe humans do too. So he developed the term affectional bonds, social links between parents and children accompanied by powerful emotions that build over time and last a long time. So you have Bowlby in the strange situation test. So you're familiar with that, so you should be shaking heads. Developed by Ainsworth, was a colleague of Bowlby, and largely influenced his attachment styles, which came a little later. We'll get to those in a second. So around 8 months, I can attest to this, I have a 10-month-old. Around 8 months, infants develop stranger anxiety. I go and I hand my baby to even my mother-in-law or my friend, and I leave the room and Luke's sick, right? Where you going? He gets upset. I come back to the room. It's like clearly he has stranger anxiety. He's dealing with that, right? But you know what? That's actually a sign of like secure attachment. That's actually a normal thing. So separation process is referred to as stranger anxiety, stranger danger. You've heard all these kind of terms before, probably. So the strange situation test is mother and child are in a strange room with some toys, exploring kind of freely and kind of having fun. And then stranger enters the room, talks to mother, and interacts with the child. Parent leaves the room. Stranger adapts her behavior to the child, and this is where usually your children start crying, be distressed. Mother returns, comforts the child, and then later leaves again, and this time the stranger leaves and the infant left alone. So they do this experiment a lot with kids who are 8 to 8 to 10 months, up to a year. And then they make deductions from those observations. So from this early experiment, you had the first major attachment styles. There were conclusions of that experiment. Number one was securely attached infants. Basically, were ones that were maybe at times distressed when the mother left, but was able to be consoled, self-soothed, or co-soothed by the mother when returned. Avoidant attachment style, about 25% of the sample, seemed to not notice the mother leaving, so just kind of doing his or her own thing, and didn't really notice when the caregiver left the room. And you have ambivalent attachment style, about 15%, preoccupied, super clingy, remain unsettled even upon the mother's return, not able to soothe, not able to regulate, co-regulate the child. And so then you have the first 3 attachment styles that were as a result of that strange test. So infants who, again, who were securely attached, they cried, but were relieved and happy when mother returned and was able to be soothed. So then later on, you see an actual 4 style, which has become, I guess, more prevalent, more common, more known about, and we talk about childhood trauma, complex trauma, is disorganized attachment. So the kind of the results of kind of this ongoing, highly stressful environment, and that could be neglectful environment, it could be abusive environment, it could be just highly stressful family dysfunction, traumatized caregiving, so forth, so on. So those are the 4 kind of major styles that kind of as a result of those early experiments. So the theory's progression. In 1985, we actually now have a survey or assessment tool, adult attachment interview. Later on, kind of with the attachment theory's progression and kind of its development, has realized the importance of what we call co-regulation. And that is, again, where I'm able to stay calm and in the presence of distress, and I'm able to help soothe my infant who's also distressed. And my infant sees me calm, and so they are able to calm themselves as well. So there's that almost that mirroring or that co-regulation that takes place. Findings show that how an adult's reflective capacity affects the can affect the attachment status of their child. So if the adult is able to kind of we call it mentalizing, but the ability to kind of process and make peace with the past, and the adult's able to do that in the caregiving role, and that actually help in a healthy way impacts the child's ability to be securely attached. Okay, so that's Bowlby. Attachment. Okay, you're holding up. Very, very, very basic, elementary level, basic to the brain. There's a lot more detail in your human growth book about this. Those of you who took trauma biology have an excellent couple texts there. Those of you who have trauma track, if not, human growth book also goes into more detail, a whole chapter on this at least, and it kind of lays the rest of the book as well. One model of the brain kind of breaks it down into 3 sections or 3 parts. Triune brain, limbic system, more the emotion and the moods, neocortex, false cognition, higher order thinking, executive functioning, ability to make plans, goals, achieve goals, reasonability. Reptilian brain, so the brain stem, more primitive, survival responses. Amygdala is also on your handout. Be familiar with an amygdala. So central for emotions such as fear is basically our threat detector, how we perceive threat, how we respond to threat, or fight or flight, freeze response when perceiving a threat. So that's very basic. Early emotions and emotional regulation. So as infants, like 6 months of age or older, primary emotions include joy, sadness, fear, anger, and surprise. It usually can appear somewhere around 6 months of life. That varies. during that first year of life, infants develop an ability to inhibit their emotion or the intensity of their reactions. This happened a lot with Luke. I mean, he was all about the passy until about 6 months, and the passy was no longer an interesting thing. His thumb was it. His thumb was the main thing. Passy was, I can give him a passy, but like, when he throws it, he's like, I'm not interested. But the thumb is it, and still it is now up until he's over 10 months, he's still it. So you basically infants develop the ability to kind of soothe themselves, right? They don't have to rely on the caregivers as much, even though sometimes you need to do that. So sometimes at first they're depending on the caregivers to help them soothe. So there's rocking, sinking, stroking, holding, those types of ways to do that. Just be aware of that. Okay, parenting styles. Baumann's parenting styles. This is one of the most widely used, cited parenting styles. Back when I took this exam in 2006, I had a question about one of these parenting styles. So sometimes they pop up on the exam. Authoritarian, punitive style in which parents exhort the child to follow directions, very firm limits and controls, strict rules, often involves showing anger when the rules are not followed, excessive spanking, those types of behaviors. Authoritative, still have rules, still have boundaries, but allows for more independence from the child. It's really a give and take. It's sometimes I have these rules they're consistent on, sometimes I'm going to make an exception based on the circumstance. I like the phrase expect a lot, support a lot. So I expect you to follow the rules, however, I'm going to support you when you need it too. Okay, so it's a balance. It leads to social confidence. Neglectful parenting style is a very apathetic, uninvolved in the child's life, and it can lead to social problems. The child having social problems, social skills issues. And then indulgent. I am very involved in your life. I am, but I still don't have any limits. You can do whatever you want. I'll be there to support you, but you can do whatever you want. Make sense? So some effects of childhood trauma, and this is definitely not an exhaustive list, but just some of the primary ones that you need to be aware of. Cognitive and social impairment. And then when I say trauma, neglect, and its effects, like I'm using those terms very loosely because in a lot of the human growth literature, not what we would refer to maybe as like trauma therapy literature, but more like the general human growth literature would combine or maybe overlap terms like abuse, neglect, maltreatment. You'll see that word a lot. So they kind of combine those terms at times, whereas more like maybe trauma therapy specialists or trauma experts might really separate, what trauma is defined as versus what neglect is, what abuse is, and so forth. So we kind of use these terms. Problems with emotional regulation, we talked about that earlier with infants and how if they don't get co-regulation, then they can have trouble with their own regulation. Attachment issues can have a heightened amygdala. This happens fairly frequently to children who've been traumatized. It kind of reminds me of my old apartment in Chamblee when I lived there for a while as a single person, and I had this smoke detector that would go off almost every day of my life there. I would cook grilled cheese, it would go off. I cook eggs, go off. I could put something in the oven, and when it went off, it's this kind of this oversensitivity to perceiving a threat. Like, no, my apartment's not going to burn down if I continue grilling this, but my smoke detector believes it is. Okay, so it's this kind of this oversensitivity to like freeze response. So like everything's a perceived threat. everything is, I'm heightened or I'm, you know, I'm activated by what's going on around me, even if it's not a threat in reality. Difficulty concentrating, behavioral problems, being emotionally flat, difficulty in relationships, obviously. And then if untreated, these effects can persist into adolescence and even adulthood. A lot of clients who have complex trauma, childhood trauma, who are, you know, 40s, 50s, 60s years old, and they're still dealing with the effects of that. Just a general kind of broad stroke with that. Okay. You may or may not have a question about this. It may be kind of laden into some of the questions on the test, but you need to know that counseling kind of has its origins in human development, and so they're looking at individuals, families, groups, cultures, as we look at people through the lens of where are you at in your development, where are you at in your stage of life, and how have you progressed through those earlier stages of development, and how does that impact you in your current function today? Okay, so it always acknowledges the stage while examining previous tasks and how that impacts current functioning in the client's life. Whereas other professions might focus more on deficiencies or diagnoses, or medical issues. Counseling as a whole tends to look at problems and these clients and people through developmental lens as a profession. Okay. All right. Older adults. Like, how do we get from infancy to older adults, right? And like,
We don't have any.
you don't have that?
No.
Sorry about that. I don't know why you don't have that. I'll get to you.
Yeah, we did
Make sure.
from,
What did you
we
lose?
had nothing in the childhood trauma section.
Okay.
Now, and then after that, we're done.
Okay. That's the end of it?
Mhm.
I'll get it to you.
Okay.
I'm guessing that's not printed right. Okay. So older adults 65 and older is the fastest growing population in the United States. You need to know that. Centenarians are also greatly increasing in numbers in recent years because we have a baby boomer population that is growing older. Dementia is a common issue with older population. Not everybody who gets older has dementia, but it is a common issue. Global term for a neurological disorder in which the primary symptoms involve a deterioration of mental functioning or cognitive functioning. Alzheimer's disease is a type of dementia. Dementia is the general umbrella. Alzheimer's disease is a common, specific type of dementia, and it's more gradual. It has a slower decrease in functioning as the person continues on. Just a couple things to note there. Briefly. So grief and loss. I once had a student tell me that that she saw a question on grief and loss on the exam, and she didn't remember any point at any class at Richmont getting information on grief and loss. So I thought we need to spend a little time on that today, just briefly. So emotional numbness, despair, disbelief, sadness, loneliness that accompanies the loss of someone we love. Can also involve first anxiety or sense of hopelessness. The thing about grief is, more often than not, this is not true for everyone, neither is grief a blanket, everyone goes through this certain way, but I'll get to that in a second. Feelings typically recur repeatedly at first for a period of time and tend to diminish over time. I say tend to, because grieving spouses tend to report that even though they've experienced a reduction of feelings, they'll never get over it. They'll never feel like it's resolved, it's done with, I'm past that, I'm over that. also similar to grieving parents of children that they have lost, also report the same thing. So be careful when people's out and grieving and it's been 3 years. Yeah, that's okay. That's part of it. One of the reasons why maybe we don't spend as much time on grief is because a lot of the even literature you read, or even like some of the maybe articles you read, or opinion pieces that maybe you read in the news, a lot of them reference Kubler-Ross, 1969, stages of grief, stages of dying. So many grief researchers and experts today tend to reject that model because there are a lot more than 5 stages of dying or 5 stages of grieving. So usually it's more fluid and flexible based on the individual experience. So this is not really an evidence-based model, but it's received such notoriety in her book that she wrote in the 60s, 70s, got so much press that it's really become kind of a commonplace reference. And I've had a student say, I got a stages of dying question on the NCE. So then now I have inserted this as oral material today. So stages of dying, you'll hear this, the 5 stages of dying, 5 stages of grief. You'll hear this commonly referred to. Originally, this was for the dying person. So someone gets a terminal diagnosis, stage 4 cancer, you have some sort of terminal illness, and this is for the individual experiencing that. But it's often applied to caregivers, it's applied to loved ones of those who have received this terminal illness. And so commonly it's applied to everyone really that's involved with death and dying. So here are the 5 stages of dying, according to Kubler-Ross. Denial is the first stage, okay, which does kind of make sense, right? No, it can't be me, this isn't happening. Often a very common reaction. Second stage is anger. Once I kind of accept that I can't deny this from reality, then I get angry with God, my doctors, my family members. Okay. The third stage is bargaining. I hope that death can somehow be delayed. So I'm now accepting the fact that it's part of my reality and I'm not as angry anymore. However, now I'm almost like in this negotiation with God. And if you'll just let me have another 3 months, then I'll do this great work for you, or I'll mend my relationships with my family, or that kind of negotiation. 4th stage is depression. So it could literally be a depressed mood episode, lasting weeks, or it could be more of anticipatory grief of I'm dying, and so what does that mean for me? And then the final stage, the 5th stage of dying, is acceptance, which comes with falling kind of into peace with the reality of that I'm dying. Okay, so you may have a question on this. If you do, I'll make sure I get that. Here you still be making notes, but I'll make sure I get this to you as well. Is this helpful? Having this on here, did you all get this from? Do you remember this material, or I'm seeing some yes, some no, some maybe. Okay.
Just to clarify, you said this is it's not evidence-based.
It's not. It's just a theory by Kubler-Ross. It's not evidence-based. There's no research backing it, but it's a very commonly used kind of way to conceptualize stages of dying.
Are there theories on grief, or like is there anything that's scientific about grief?
Some. It's one of those things that's kind of hard to measure because it's so individually based. But most people with grief tend to say, it's based on the individual experience, and that the evidence behind it is that there's a lot of stages for a lot of people, and they're fluid, and you kind of, even if there were 5 stages, so to speak, you may start out in anger and then go to denial and go back to peace, and then a month from now you're in bargaining mode. So more fluid is not, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, as Kubler-Ross has kind of designed it. More fluid, more flexible.
And these apply to people grieving as well.
Yes, they've been commonly applied to people who are grieving the loss of someone or the anticipatory loss of someone, even though the original theory was for the dying person. Okay, let's review some resources. You don't have this either, huh? Okay. So I like Rosenthal, Encyclopedia of Counseling. You can do the Erfurt book, and that's good. I've looked through that, and that's a solid one too. I think Erfurt and two other authors on that, right? I like the encyclopedia because it's comprehensive. I like it because you can get an audio edition, plug it in your car, and literally listen ad nauseum to counseling content, you know, every day of your work life for the next 3 months before you take the exam, right? So it's pricey. I'm gonna look this up just last week. It's pretty pricey.
It's really pretty reasonable.
Oh, you found it reasonable? Okay. What did you find? Are you sharing it? Okay, good. It's really reasonable when you get it 4 or 5, 6 people sharing it, which is what I recommend. Or 70, right? Yeah. So that's a great resource. The Sandtrock text for human lifespan is a great resource. A good text to review. You know, your counseling systems text are great too, because a lot of the counseling theories will have developmental aspects that are kind of, you know, interweaved in theory themselves. Yeah.
I have the encyclopedia, and it's really daunting. Is there a particular like way you go about like setting up like a system for it, or just like dive in?
Most people dive in or get the audio. Yeah. Or you get in a study group and you take 3 chapters, I'll take 3 chapters, and then we'll write notes and then we'll exchange notes. So you use something like that. Has anyone else found helpful strategies?
Well, I don't know that this is helpful, but like I'm about 3 or 4 pages into the 4th edition of the encyclopedia, and it's been really helpful, which is great. But he actually suggests you do it chronologically because he draws upon things he mentioned earlier. And even for me, it's made a lot more sense because he's very repetitive throughout, which is nice because it helps you like really get it. But unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be like a quick way to do it. So at least I want to.
No, but he offers great mnemonics, and I think he offers great insights, and then even some of them on his questions, I like why he tells you why they're the wrong answer.
Yeah,
And I feel like it's really good use of time. Even though some of it's repetitive and redundant, you find yourself, you go, oh, yep, I remember that, and then you can move on, but I really think it's a great one.
Yeah, I like it because the way the test questions are, because it's kind of like how I brought up a few of them today. It's like you'll have the answer, but then you'll also see the rationale about why it's correct.
And the app that's on so it's like there's an app on it, and so basically there's about 30 questions instead of 100, and they're repeated in the book. So if you want to see if you even like that style for $4.99, I think there's an app, and you can see if you like that style to invest in the whole book. Is another way of doing it, but they offer like 30 questions each or 28, and then they're still in the book. There's an additional 70 in the book on top of that.
Roosevelt's up to technological game.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Yes.
I found the best way for me to go through it is to go through and answer all the questions and mark which ones I got wrong, and then read the explanation for the ones that I got wrong.
Yeah, I didn't spend a lot of time when I got them right. I just moved on.
You just moved on. Okay.
I got a lot more right than I thought that I would. And it's encouraging because when you get them right, then it doesn't feel as, I think, psychological.
I will say if you have time, because I think that's a great system, especially as I'm running out of time towards my test. I will say even the ones you get right, like he often includes information about the other answers too, where he doesn't include that in other questions. So like if you do have time, they're still really valuable to read.
Good.
And he puts the other thing I found, Sophie, did you get that he puts the stuff in bold? You really want to watch the stuff in the explanations that he puts in bold.
That's helpful.
Because he really kind of brings it out. So if you're scanning it to look for things, be sure to look for the bold, because that might be if you're hot on time, he really does kind of emphasize those issues.
And also, I think chapter 12 in the book is like from previous last year interns, they said that this is like a super boot camp review chapter or whatever. And so it has like everything you need in this one chapter as far as you don't have to like go through the whole thing. Maybe multiple times, maybe read this like one time and then try to go over the last final chapter. And the dude before said the last final CD is something to listen to. One of the best for you.
Good. Did you have?
I was just going to mention, everyone may know this, but the CDs are in the library. And
Thank you for reminding everybody of that.
you can check those out.
Yes. Yes. So not all 70 of you can check it out, but one of you can. Who's leaving early to do that right now?
They have multiples of M.
Yeah, they have multiple. I think more than one. Good. So you can purchase them in the group. You can check them out.
One note is on Rosenthal's website, he does give a note that there's an updated version of the book and also of the CDs. It's like big red print, like it's in, you must be fast. I don't know what the differences are between the text and how that would affect our testing, but he gets paid.
Right. DSM-5.
Versus DSM-5.
Okay. So if that's true, then you could review your psychopathology class notes for what the changes in the DSM-5 are. Might be okay, but or you could order the new version if that's true. These are all